until one day he died. He had a heart attack on the dining room floor. He left his body and he thought, I have wasted my life. Once upon a time, a long, long time ago, there was a young woman living in the northern part of what we would now call India. And we don't know a lot about her. We don't know what kind of family she was from. We don't know really what she looked like or what her daily life was like. But we know she was young, probably 20 years old or so, maybe a little less. And we know that she had an infant, a young child, and we know that that infant died. So you can imagine the shock of that. Waking up maybe in the morning and coming to the crib and just needing stillness, nothing. And she was so shocked, she couldn't accept what was happening. And so she picked up her child and she began to walk around the village, knocking on doors, asking for someone to bring her child back to life. And each door that she knocked on, she became more desperate, asking for medicine, asking for healing, asking for a doctor. And each person that she spoke to, cousins and nephews and grandparents and uncles, friends that she'd known her whole life, trying to tell her, there's no way to bring this child back to life. And finally, someone said to her, there's a wise man on the edge of the village. People say he's a Buddha, a fully awakened one. Maybe he can help. And so, still carrying her infant in her arms, she goes to the edge of the village and she meets the Buddha. And the Buddha sees immediately two things. He sees, first of all, he cannot bring a child back to life. And he also sees that this young woman is in such a state of shock that he can't tell her that. She won't be able to hear. And so he says to her, please bring me a mustard seed from a house in the village where no one has ever died. And if you can bring me a mustard seed from a house in the village where no one has ever died, maybe I can help. And so with renewed hope, this young woman goes back to the village and all over again begins knocking on doors, and she's asking, do you have a mustard seed? And of course, every time she asks, do you have a mustard seed? The person who answers the door says, yes, of course, we have a mustard seed. And then she asks, has anyone ever died in this house? And every house that she knocks on, the door, she hears a story. Of tragedy, of a grandparent dying, or a child dying, some loved one dying, a close friend dying. In every house that she calls on, someone has passed away in that very house. And she begins to see. It's not just her. That this is the nature of things. This is the way it is, that tragedy is folded into our lives. It's folded into our days, and nobody is exempt. And she goes back to the Buddha. And she's able to let go of her child. And within a week, she's ordained as a monastic. And she's inspired. She's inspired by what she's seen. She's inspired by the shared humanity, the shared predicament that we find ourselves in. And so she practices, cultivating these qualities of the heart, these qualities of the mind. And now, I've never cried before telling this story, but for some reason it's like, maybe things happening in my life right now. Yeah, 2,600 years later, we still know her name, Kisa Gautami. And she's remembered as one of the Buddha's great disciples who walked the path to its end and discovered a joy that is unshaken by the sorrows that greet every one of us. Save us.
How's the sound? Is it better if I hold it up like this? Okay. So the title of this talk is Your Garden Grows at Midnight. Is anybody a gardener? Anybody a gardener? Some? Maybe we garden other things. I garden my inbox a lot. But we're using this metaphor of gardening because I think there's something we really learn through the wild of planting seeds, right? I mean, gardening is a lot of work. You have to plant seeds. You have to make sure the soil is fertile, and you have to fertilize and make it a healthy soil with a good balance of chemistry in there. And you need a certain kind of weather, temperature, rain, sun. You might need a certain kind of season, right? There's a lot of wisdom, actually. There's a lot of effort and learning that goes into cultivating a garden. But actually, in the end, we are not the ones who are forcing the seeds to grow. We're simply tending the conditions. We're making sure all of those are in balance. The right kind of seed, the soil, the water, the sunlight, the chemicals, so that when the timing is right, and it's kind of mysterious and magical, there's something inside that seed, some kind of life force that knows, okay, it's time. And then something very strong, actually, if the conditions are right. Think about how much force it takes to force a plant up through the weight of soil. I think in particular of, here we are in autumn, but I'm thinking about springtime, like the ground has been frozen and there's these bulbs in there that at some point push up, and they're not tender sprouts. I mean, they're tender too, but they have to push up through the frozen earth to then grow and grow and grow and then give birth to a daffodil. There's nothing that we've forced about that, right? That something in there, it's nature, is to become a daffodil. And I think that's so much what we're doing in the path. Often, the way we're trained, particularly I think we have outside forces, societal forces that train us to think that we're actually forcing this thing to happen. Anything that happens in our lives, it's us. We made it happen, we got the grade, we did the thing, we got the job, right? There's so much effort that we're trained to do. But in this practice, it's different. It's like relinquishing, letting go of that kind of, in some ways, it's almost a false devotion to ego that thinks that the ego can do it. It's letting go of that. Instead, devoting our hearts to this very natural force that's already in us, right? Our hearts have these seeds. There's nothing we did to create them. There's nothing we can do to destroy that natural force. And simply what we're doing is putting the conditions together. With a lot of patience, there's effort on the path. We have to till the soil and know what kind of seeds we want to grow and know what seeds we're weeding out. But that eventually, again, we can't force the timing, but there's something in us, this very natural instinct that knows, oh, this is the way towards a daffodil, right? We have this. And if I water here, and if I do this practice, and I guide this way, that way, eventually then there will be this whole garden, not only of daffodils, but all these other beautiful qualities of the heart and the mind. They're all already in us, and we're not forcing them in practice. In some ways, we're just clearing the way for them to come of their own accord. So some of these qualities we've been talking about actually online. I know some of you have been following these day-longs every month. You know about the paramis. So there's this list in the Buddhist canon called the paramis, or the paramitas in the later schools. And in the early Buddhist school, there's 10. So I'm going to name them for you. There's a lot. The Buddha was pretty thorough. So let's see if we can do the 10. We might need your help. But 10 qualities of the heart of the mind, beautiful heart qualities. First one is generosity. Then we have integrity, ethics, renunciation, energy on the path, wisdom, equanimity, metta, truthfulness, resolve, and patience. Those are pretty good ingredients for a garden, right? And as we keep putting our energy into these qualities, so much grows. These qualities can come out and grow, but also this very deep intuition that knows how to be free. Sometimes we don't even give ourselves that opportunity or that potential that we know how to be free, especially given the state of the world. But your garden grows at midnight means that even in the darkest of times, in the Buddha time, there were wars and injustice and all kinds of problems. And right there, right in the middle, he discovered this pathway to deep and lasting freedom. And he said, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if you're Brahmin or Dalit. It doesn't matter your background. Everybody, every human, is their birthright to this kind of freedom. It's not denying the state of the world. It's actually finding our way right in the middle of things to equanimity and kindness and love and skillful means, wisdom. This, in some ways, is what we most deeply want, our heart's deepest longing, that seed that is a daffodil. So how do we cultivate these gardens? How do we make them grow? Right in the darkest hour. So we're not going to talk about all 10 of these. That would be a lot. But we're going to focus just on 2, and I think the story of Kisa Gotami illustrates many, but in particular these 2. This first one, when she had the wisdom to see she wasn't alone, that everyone had suffered loss as she had, there was an immediate kind of relinquishment, giving away her worldly possessions, finding her way into a monastic, a renunciate community. So simplicity, letting go. And then we want to talk about love, how this path isn't ever walked alone. Like, we really need, in the simplicity, to find a deep kind of connection that, again, is the heart's nature, the heart's deepest nature. So letting go and cultivating love.
Yeah, letting go. God help us. Letting go is the heart of the Dharma path. It's the first thing that we do when we sit down, the first time to meditate. What do? We let go of our obsession with the ruminating mind. We release, and we just come back. We arrive in the body. The first step of the path is a letting go. And then the final step of the path is said to be a deep, deep release, a letting go. And every step of the way along the path is a series of releases, of letting go. And I like to talk about it sometimes in terms of 3 steps. You know, like, okay, well, how? How do we let go? How do we simplify? I think about it in terms of we simplify our lives, like our external lives. We simplify our lives so we can simplify the mind, so that we can deepen and release, right? We simplify our lives so we can simplify this heart, this mind, so that we can deepen and release. So years ago, this is maybe 20 years ago, I was in a transitional period in my life. Basically, all I wanted to do was meditation practice. And so I couldn't have a decent job because I kept going on retreat, and I would go on retreat and I'd come back and I'd get whatever job I could, which was usually waiting tables or painting houses. Although I was also a telemarketer, and that's another story. And in the middle of that, I was trying to make a decision about whether to move to a monastery, which seems like a really big leap. And I needed a car so that I could get to work, so I went into the newspaper, which is like, you know, when there were newspapers with classified sections, and I went to the classified section and I found a Subaru Justy, which is the cheapest possible car that you could buy in the market, which had like 150,000 miles on it, because that's what I could afford. And I showed up to see the Subaru Justy in a parking lot in Boulder, Colorado, where I was living, and I test drove with this guy who was selling it. And I said to him, you know, he was this middle-aged guy, nondescript. I don't even really remember what he looked like, actually. But I said to him, why are you selling your car? And he said, can I tell you a story? And I said, yes. And he told me this story about how he had been a successful entrepreneur, where he'd started one restaurant, and that had been successful, and then a second restaurant, and then a third restaurant. And by the time he was in his late 40s, he was running 2, 3 very successful restaurants, making a lot of money, very successful, many people working for him, and he had a family that he never saw. And there was more and more tension in his family life. He had 2 kids, he was married, he had a wife, but he couldn't not do all the things that he was doing. He wouldn't let go of it. Until one day he died. He had a heart attack on the dining room floor of one of his restaurants and literally died on the ground. And he had one of these classic near-death experiences. He left his body, and he was hovering above his body, looking down as these paramedics tried to bring him back to life. And he could see all of like his employees around him, and he could see all of these customers and this kind of chaos happening. And he thought, I have wasted my life. And he was lucky. The paramedics got there in time, and they brought him back to life. And he woke up in the hospital, and he decided before he'd even left his hospital bed, he was done. And as soon as he recovered, he sold all 3 of these restaurants, and he took that money and he started a consulting business where he could make his own hours. He could work part-time. And he told me, I never miss a sunrise. I never miss a sunset, and I never miss my kids' soccer games. So you could take a moment, if you want to close your eyes, you could close your eyes, you could leave them open. Just take a moment, maybe take a breath. And call up your own life. Take a look at your days. How does it feel in your life these days? What's the atmosphere? And is there anything extra? You might ask yourself, what needs to fall away? Yeah, you could open your eyes. So we simplify our life, and we simplify our life, there's a natural deepening of attention. If we have less going on, and that less going on means perhaps less activities, maybe it means less consumerism, like less buying into the cycle of want, of needing and this and that, and I've got to get the other thing, and Amazon, oh my God. Maybe it means less social media. Maybe it means less news consumption. Maybe whatever it means for you, there's this simplifying of the external world that deepens your awareness and deepens your attention, and then your intention, and then if you bring meditation into that, then it deepens further. And you begin to have this capacity to see. And that's what we call insight, vipassana. We begin to see into the nature of things. And that's when we experience the sense of deepening, of release. That's the letting go that happens internally. And so we've got Ajahn Chah. He says very famously, you've probably heard this quote before if you've been hanging out around these Dharma centers, but it's one of my favorites. If you let go a little, you experience a little peace. If you let go a lot, you experience a lot of peace. And if you let go completely, you will know complete peace and freedom. Your struggle with the world will have come to an end.
And yet, no, I'm good without it. As our beloved teacher Mingyur Rinpoche often says, letting go is not giving up, right? It's not giving up. And sometimes I think we have to let go in all kinds of different ways. We let go through wisdom, like this reflection we just did. Oh, maybe I don't need that extra doormat or whatever it is. For me, it would be extra chai tea. Don't need that. But also, sometimes we know that we need to let go, and we're just not ready to let go. So we cling and we cling and we cling, whether it's our views or a particular relationship or job, whatever it is. We have to suffer. We do. We have to show up again and again and notice the tension of that clinging. Before the mind, again, these are creating the conditions, the mind on its own can learn, oh, but actually this other way, if I let go, even of just the way I'm viewing this situation, creates a whole bunch more peace. But it has to happen often naturally on its own as we keep practicing again and again, keep showing up and noticing the tension, the heat of that clinging. Kiso Gotami did this exactly. right? She had to go to all of those houses and hear all the stories before her heart was really ready to let go. Then what it does, I think letting go, sometimes we get an idea that it's kind of like giving up, you know? It's like a surrender and then things are just as they are. It can lead to indifference. But the kind of relinquishment, the kind of renunciation we're talking about is actually a very engaged, a very energetic kind of simplicity. The word for renunciation in Tibetan means an inspired moving towards. So while we might be sloughing off something here, we're moving towards something that's very energizing and inspiring to us. So I think one reason why when we hear about letting go, it feels scary, and we don't really like this word renunciation so much in our culture. I've seen this in my own heart. It's like, okay, well, maybe I'm ready to let go of all those chai teas or whatever. But I'm this is a silly example, but what happens with this space that is opened when we let go? There's fear. There's a fear of even opening our schedule, right? What if I let go of some of these activities? But what am I going to do in that space? Space can be scary. So that seems important to acknowledge. And then to look at, okay, well, what is actually still here? If I let go of all of these things that are creating security for me, right? We're sloughing off these security blankets one after another. Okay, well, there's space and spaciousness, which can feel scary, kind of empty. But also, and the Buddha did this beautifully, he pointed to how the space is actually full of connection. We're beings of connection. And here, if you'll bear with me, I'm just going to get a little philosophical here for a little bit. If you look at your experience, moment by moment, what is happening? What is happening in this moment? There's seeing, there's hearing, there's a kind of felt sense in the body, there might be thoughts and emotions in the mind. All of those things are coming about because of connection. Your eyes are connecting to objects being seen. Your ears are connecting to sound. It's all connecting. We are beings of connection. It's the whole deal. That's it. So when there's enough space to see that actually it's not a void, that it's full of this kind of connection, there comes again a very organic call to care. I care about beings that I'm seeing. I care about this heart-mind that I'm connecting with right now. In Pali, it's anukampa. It's a kind of quivering of the heart, a responsiveness that cares. It cares about our own life. It cares about the lives of others. It cares about the world. And so within that spaciousness, if we let ourselves get tender, and we do, we get tender, we get sensitive, we kind of wade down through all of these bits and parts of us that need attention. Deep down in there, all there is really, it's hard to name. You can call it connection, you can call it care, anukampa. You could also call it metta. And metta is a hard word to translate in Pali, loving kindness or love. Not a romantic kind of love, but just a deep sense of, oh, I'm connected, right? I love the world. So renouncing isn't about abandoning the world, and sometimes we hear that translation, about leaving the world. But no, we fall more in love with the world when we're able to create the space to see how much we care about it. I think sometimes for me, in my social location, I have to look to other cultures to find the inspiration of connection and belonging. So when we lived in Honolulu, we practiced at a Tibetan temple. And we loved going to the Tibetan temple because George was always there. And George was this wonderful, he was like a benefactor of the center. Just always there. He's putting out the cushions. He was making tea for people. He was greeting us. He was giving people rides to and from. He was a storyteller. He would always have a story to tell you. And mostly it was about being Okinawan. So George and his family was from the island of Okinawa, which is south of Japan. It was colonized by Japan, but has its own culture and language. And there, the most important thing is your belonging in community. It's called ikigai. It's our reason for getting up in the morning is because we're participating in something bigger than us. And you could see it. George was living his culture so beautifully at this temple. Like, no, I'm just here to be around all of you and to offer, right? Need a chair, do you need a cushion? There's so much well-being there, so much inspiration in how his beingness was about connection. The sense of many hands make the work light. So I just found this poem today that I wanted to share with you. I always have more poems than there's time for. There's two. Do you want to hear one about community, or do you want to hear one about your garden grows at midnight? Okay, let's do the community one first, because this talks about connection, then we'll see if there's time for the other one. This is called About Standing in Kinship. It's by Kimberly Blazer. We all have the same little bones in our foot. 26 with funny names like navicular. Together they build something strong. Our foot arch a pyramid holding us up. The bones don't get casts when they break. We tape them, one phalange to its neighbor for support. Other things, like sorrow, work that way too. Find healing in the leaning, the closeness. Our feet have 1/4 of all the bones in our body. Maybe we should give more honor to feet and to all those tiny but blessed cogs in the world, communities, the forgotten architecture of friendship. I love that. Communities are the forgotten architecture of friendship. And I actually think that we are living this sense of your garden grows at midnight right now. This is the garden. Because for our experience, having been in retreat, so isolated in Oregon, really since the pandemic began, many of you, you found us, we found you in the middle of the midnight of COVID. And it's been just slowly cultivating again and again, conversations, gatherings, practicing. And here we are, the fruit of all of that resiliency that humanity had during those years. So we're not quarantined anymore and we're not isolated, but we're finding all kinds of other challenges in the world, aren't we? Just like day by day getting worse. And so I don't have the answers to how we're supposed to confront this kind of challenge, the multiverse of pandemics that we're up against. But I do know that there's so much value and strength found in intentionally cultivating these communities. The garden in my own heart and mind that feels its natural metta, that feels inclined towards simplicity, and then towards really honoring the ways that we can belong to each other, the ways that we can accompany each other. In our very messy, superhuman, very, not superhuman like advanced, but very, very human, messy, chaotic kind of ways, right? It has to be messy. Gardens are messy. But we do need each other, I think, on the path to inspire, to guide, to support. Yeah. So to quote my dear friend, Devon, who's also a good Dharma teacher, he just says, love liberates. And I kind of think that's what we're talking about here. So maybe we close there and, well, I thought maybe I'd save it till the very end. Okay. Because we would love to hear from you. We have some time. We have 15 minutes or so, and wondering if there are comments or questions or anything coming up in the community around what we've shared reflections. Yeah, love to hear from some.
What's up, y'all? Reverend Mikey Noshel here from Wild Heart Meditation Center in Nashville, Tennessee. Thanks for checking us out. Do me a favor, please like and subscribe. And if you feel moved to leave a donation, you can do so at wildheartmeditationcenter.org or the Venmo link in the description. Peace and love.